And Bethesda has sent me this rather mysterious package with the Skyrim logo on it. Trademark. Skyrim logo, trademark. As you guys can see, this package is absolutely tiny. Sounds like it has something in it though, so they're not completely trolling us, guys. But we need to open this up. I'm obviously going to be using a bullet to do this because I don't own a pair of scissors and I was completely unprepared for this video. Okay, here we go. Let's unbox this. Oh, it's a nice black box. It looks a lot nicer now. I don't want this to fall out. Alright, so here we go. Oh, it's broken! Ah, this is actually pretty cool. This is a miniature dragonborn. Oh my god, look at the detail on this resin miniature. Obviously, we need to build this now. Now, if you guys didn't know, I actually build a lot of miniatures for fun. I play a lot of Warhammer 40,000, and we're going to build this in a moment. But the company that made this actually now own the IP from Bethesda to make miniatures of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, which is pretty insane. And now I know this company, their name is Mofidius, by the way, and I've got a link to their website linked in the description below if you want to check them out. But they're an awesome company. They've already done an entire range of miniatures for Fallout, and you can check those out in the link in the description as well. But this is one I painted previously, and I've got a painting tutorial for this guy actually on my other channel, my second channel, where I paint miniatures like this and I do tutorials on how to paint them. Camera, will you please focus? Here's someone from the Brotherhood of Steel I'm currently working on. But they've basically made like an entire miniature game that is extremely like Fallout, and I haven't played the Skyrim version yet, but I suppose it's going to be very similar. So I'm very excited for this. So what we are going to do in today's video is we're actually going to build this dragonborn and then we're going to paint it. And I'm quite excited because it actually looks like the dragonborn dual-wielding two swords, which you can see there. And there's actually a dragon tail there. So I think it's actually the dragonborn off the front cover of the game Skyrim. But again, you can actually buy this miniature link down below in the description if you want to follow along with the video and just have like your own miniature dragonborn, which I think is, I mean, even if you don't play the tabletop game like me, these miniatures are pretty cool. And if you want to like collect your own Skyrim army, that's pretty sick, man. Okay, so now we're going to do a tutorial on how to build the dragonborn from Skyrim. Oh god, that's so cool. I never thought I'd be able to do this. This is awesome. The first step when working with any injection molded resin products is to remove any release agent left over from the mold. This is really easy to do. All you need is some gentle dishwashing detergent and also a toothbrush. Anybody's is fine. You can use your sister's if you like. You don't even need to ask her. Then just get some warm water and soap and start brushing the miniature gently. If you don't do this, by the way, the miniature will feel a little bit slimy sometimes and paint won't actually stick to it, and then you'll end up with lots of issues later on in the painting process. So trust me, just spend a few minutes gently brushing it now and you'll save yourself a lot of butt hurt later. Once you're done, you're going to rinse the miniature in water and then you can just leave it to dry. You may also notice with resin miniatures that skinny parts are wonky and bent, like this super mutant's hammer here. This is very easy to fix though. You just need to run it under a hot tap or just get a bowl of hot water and submerge the part you want to fix in the warm water. Once the resin warms up, you can then easily bend it back into the position it should be in. Do make sure that you're gentle though and careful with bending it. Resin really is quite versatile though, so as long as it's warm you can do this without it breaking. Once you're done bending it back into position though, put it into cold water to cure it and it will go back into a straight hammer once again. As you can see, it's super easy and you can do this even after it's painted, but I recommend doing it before you paint at this point in time. When the miniature is completely dry, you're going to want to remove the parts from the frame. To do this, you're going to need some metal modeling files that can be found for about $5 at any modeling store, and some modeling clippers. Trust me, don't use scissors. It is a terrible idea. I used to do it when I was about 12 and God, it was just dangerous and bits were flying everywhere. So just invest $10 in some metal clippers. I'll link all the equipment below that you need if you're interested. Then we're just going to start cutting the parts out, but do take note of the pole coming out of the foot of the dragonborn, which fits into this hole in the base. So make sure you don't cut little bits like that off the model. Then also make sure that when you're cutting the fiddly bits that you cut a little bit away from the weapon shaft, and we can trim that down later on in the video just so you don't end up accidentally cutting off the sword or something like that. Lastly, we have the dragon's tail, and you can see that this has a fitting on the base that you put the tail into, so make sure that you don't accidentally cut this part off as well. It's important not to rush this, though don't worry if you do mess up and make a mistake, because it can usually be salvaged with super glue or green stuff, as I'll talk about later on in this tutorial. Next, we're going to be using the file to remove the rough edges that we cut the base from, as you can see here. There are also some rough edges on the feet of the dragonborn that we can even out with the file here. And just take time with this because you can't undo any mistakes that you make, and some of the resins are softer than some of the harder plastics, so make sure that you understand the material you're working with here. There are also some mold lines across the helmet, and I'm going to file these down so the model looks much smoother. This just makes the miniature look more natural to me. You don't really need to do all of this filing to such an extent, but in my opinion, why bother spending upwards of 3 hours painting something if you can still see the little lines and rough edges that shouldn't be there in the first place? It really just ruins the model. So really just take your time here because it's going to be worth it in the end. Make sure also that the dragon's tail fitting is smooth so it fits seamlessly onto the base when we come to stick it onto the miniature. And you can see that the dragon's tail fits with no gaps, so I can stop filing it now. Be sure to dry fit all of the parts before you actually glue anything together though. You're going to want to use super glue when you're attaching resin parts together. Be sure to use only a small amount of super glue to cover the surface in a very thin layer. And then you can fit the dragon's tail onto the base like so. We can then place the dragonborn onto the base, but I'm not actually going to glue him in place yet, because the dragon tail actually wraps around the miniature, which would make him extremely hard to paint if we did stick him down so early in this process. So instead, I'm going to leave him separate from his base. It's always good to plan ahead with these kind of models and just think about how you're actually going to access different parts because you are painting something very tiny. So let's add the dragonborn's arm to his body next. I'm cutting it carefully around the dimple we can see on the inside of his arm here that fits into his arm socket, so I don't actually cut it off accidentally. But once again, we can fix that with super glue if we do. Once you're done, apply a little bit of glue and then fit the arm into position. Be sure to dry fit it first though, and if you're unsure about where it should go or what position it should be in, just look at the miniature's artwork so you know how it should look. Next, for the other dagger arm, we need to remove the extra bit of resin from the blade. So I'm going to do this with the clippers and then I'm just going to file the rest down until it's smooth. And now we can fit this weapon to the dragonborn with super glue. You'll notice though that there is a slight gap between the arm and the shoulder, which really triggers me, and we will fix this. Essentially though, aside from that, the dragonborn is completely built. But if you want to fix any of the tiny gaps in the miniature, carry on watching this. I'm actually going to use something called green stuff for this. You can get a whole wad of this stuff for rather cheaply, and it will literally last you decades, and it's also quite cheap as well. All you need to do though is take a little bit of the green and the blue part and then smush them together until they turn into a dark green colour. It's basically like blue tack, apart from it sets really hard. Once you're done though, you can get a little bit on the model and you can just start to work it into the gap there. This will make the model seem more fluid once you're done, so you cannot actually see the connection between the arm and shoulder. So if you were just looking at this miniature as some random person, you wouldn't know that those two bits were like stuck together basically. Another good tip is to wet the tool that you are using to mold the green stuff. This basically just stops the green stuff from sticking to your tools, and instead it just sticks to the model you're working on. Green stuff usually takes about a day to dry completely hard. I'm going to go around this whole miniature and fix any of the seams on it, like blending the dragon tail into the base to make the ending seem less abrupt to me. Again, you don't need to do this, but it just elevates your miniature game to the next level if you do decide to take the time to do these little details like this. We have now finished the dragonborn, but if you want a guide on how to paint him next like an absolute boss, you should check out the link in the description for a full step-by-step tutorial on how to do that. And also, of course, you can check out the other link on buying this miniature and a bunch of the other Skyrim and Fallout miniatures that I have tutorials on how to paint on my other tabletop YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below, which I recommend you also subscribe to if you're interested in more miniature videos like this one. But I would appreciate a like on this video before you go, and if you also have the time to leave a comment if you found this video helpful or maybe what you want to see next. That would also be magnificent. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Thanks if you got to the end of this video, and I'll see you on the tabletop channel. Have a great day. And slay some dragons.